Hello and welcome everyone. Today I want to show you how to create alpha masks to use in sculpting and texture painting. You can use these masks in many softwares like ZBrush, Substance Painter or Blender, and these can give you some really nice details like stitching and seams on clothings or zippers, for example. I will show you how to create one of these masks in Blender, and the version that I'm using is 2.81. So I want to create an alpha mask for a stitch which I can use to sculpt stitches quickly on my sculptings. So what I will do is that quickly create a model of a single stitch and then use that to create a height mask, and then that can be used to create a simple alpha mask. So let's start. So this is the default Blender file. Let's delete everything, pressing A and X to delete everything, and let's create a plane. Shift A and select the plane. And please make sure that you are using the Blender internal units instead of using a unit system like the metric system or the imperial system. So go into this tab here and then units, then choose none. So I will now create a simple stitch, and this method can be used to create any kind of alpha mask. Let's start. Now this looks good enough. So I've just quickly modeled it for demonstration purposes, and for your own projects you can maybe create some more details with it and customize it in whatever way you want. So the next step is to create a camera. So Shift A and just create a camera, and we need to position the camera exactly that it's looking from the top down onto this mesh. And an easy way to do this is to just go to the top view, press Ctrl Alt 0. Now let's change the aspect ratio of the camera so that it produces a square render, and let's just use 1024 for both height and width here. And that should be enough to give us the detail that we require in our mask. Now we will change the camera type from perspective to orthographic. This will mean that the objects that are far away from the camera do not appear smaller in size, which is what we need for this mask. This is not how the objects in real world appear, but that will help us in creating this mask. Also change this orthographic scale so it fits our mesh. Now we need the camera to be exactly at value 1 on the z-axis. Let's do this. Select the camera, open up the sidebar by pressing N, And with the camera selected, let's go to item, set, so just enter 1 here, and now it's done. Good. We do this positioning to make sure that our output color values match the range available in a height mask. So in a height mask, the values range from 0 to 1, with 0 representing the low points of the structure and 1 representing the highest point of the structure. So with this positioning, we know now that between 1 here and 0 here, whatever structure we have will have values between 0 and 1. And when we will create our height mask, we will know that nothing from our mesh is left out. So we will also position our mesh to be inside this range. So let's take it up a little bit like this. So now we need to create a material for our mesh here, so that it represents the depth from the camera. So let's do this. Open up another workspace, and we can change this to input shading. So we have the rendered view, and press 0 to go to the camera view, and change this to shader editor. Select either the plane or the cylinder, doesn't matter, and create a new material. Delete the principal BSDF. Create an emission node here. Connect it to surface here, and assign the same material to the other object as well. Okay. So now we need a node called camera data, and it has this view z depth output, which you can plug into your color and see the depth buffer from the camera. So now we can see that the objects that are near to our camera, like the upper surface of this thread here, are darker, and the object far away are brighter. And we need to invert it. So let's use an invert node here. Let's turn off the overlays here because they're a bit distracting. So another problem is that our mesh doesn't cover the complete 0 to 1 range here. That's why it appears so bright, because the lowest part of the mesh is not exactly at 0, and the highest part is not exactly at 1. And if we can see from the N panel here and select our masks and apply rotation and scale, complete height of our object is only 0.5 units. So to map the complete Z range of our mesh to the 0 to 1 range of our height map, first we need to take our mesh higher a little bit so that it's nearer to the camera as much as possible without any clipping. So let's take it down a little bit. Okay. And then we need to map the range that we are getting from our camera to 0 to 1. And we can use a node called map range node for this purpose. Let's add a map range node and add it between our camera data and the invert node. So I noticed that there is a problem here. The high points in our mesh are appearing darker, and that's because the invert node is set up incorrectly. So we need to use the color as an input here. So let's do that now. So now we know from the position that the highest point in our mesh would be closer to 1, and the lowest points would be closer to about approximately 0.5, because we know the dimensions in z coordinate for our mesh is 0.535, and we can account for it in this map range node. Let's make it a little bit bigger, and we can change our maximum to a lower value to account for it. So intuitively we can see that we need to set this middle point of our mask as dark as possible. So we need to set this maximum value so that it results in a darker color in the middle. So let's try this, and I think this is enough. And if you're wondering why this map ranges start from 0, it's because this is before we invert the color. So the object that is near to camera has a depth of 0, and as we move away from the camera, the depth increases. So now let's make a test render, press F12, and it looks good enough. Let's head over to the Compositing tab now. Now I want to make a vignette effect for the mask, which will soften the edges, and this will result in the edges not being visible when the mask is being used for sculpting or texture painting. So let's click Use Nodes, and we can see our render here. Also Control Shift click the render layer to make a viewer so that it's also visible in the backdrop. Okay, and go to View on the end panel and click Fit. So let's create an ellipse mask first. Let's see how it looks like. Connect it to the viewer. Let's take the height to 0.5 and 0.5, and then we need to blur it. And let's increase the blur value in both directions. And then we need to multiply it to our render. So add a converter math node. The second input should be our image, and click on multiply. So it looks good enough. So let's connect the output to our composite node and press F12. So this is our final alpha mask. We can save it. Let's go to image, save as. So to save it, give it a name like this. You can use a PNG file, and for color just use black and white and use a color depth of 16, so here we have more detail, and click save. And I will quickly show you an example of how to use it in sculpting. So let's create a new Blender file, delete everything, create a UV sphere, let's make it a little bigger, and then we can go to multi-resolution, subdivide it a little bit, go to sculpting. So first you need to select your texture, go to texture, click on new, go to this texture tab and open your texture that you just created, select it, and there you have it. So now you have it in your texture. Select the mapping to be area plane, and you can use rake here. This will mean that if you rotate your mouse during a stroke, the texture will follow your stroke and rotate as well. And this is a very nice property to have when you are doing small details like stitching or seams. Let's go to stroke here and increase the spacing to 50 so that the stitches don't overlap each other. Go to fall off and select constant. Increase the size a little bit, and let's try it out. So looks like the detail is not good enough. Let's go back and subdivide our mesh. So let's try again. And there you go. Looks good enough. Let's smooth it a little bit on the sides. So this is how you can create really good alpha masks to put details in your sculpts and your texture painting. In the description of this video, you can find the blend file, which contains the setup of creating an alpha mask, as well as some masks that I have created using this method. So if you have any suggestions or you know something that I failed to mention, then please write down in the comments. Bye bye.